Tato Jaya Udiraye
Ashtapreshu Bhadreshu
Ashtapreshu Bhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityatma Shloke
Nityatma Shloke
Neshtiti
Bhakti Bhakti Neshtiti.
About chapter 10, chapter 1, text 4. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit about our topic. I'll try to read it in as we talk about different, read it in as we talk about different philosophical points. But yeah, as I was thinking there, Madhava, remember who wrote the Gerard Madhava song? Didn't mean to pick on. I thought you were about to say something. No, I was just trying to read. Anyone remember who wrote the Gerard Madhava song? Yeah. Yeah, that's what we're talking. And I remember what's the name? Krishna was mentioning a while ago. He was saying the names of the song, Gerard Madhava, it's the name of his deeds. So he wrote the names of his deeds. So that's how we came up with that song. I'm not sure if that's the only. I think that's it. I think you said that song. So that's Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Second from right away is Bhaktisiddhanta's father. So let's start with the 10th canto. So we have the versions. So the 10th canto, so I don't remember what happened. Well, a lot of stuff that happened in the 9th canto. But what else sticks out? What else stuck out for you? 9th canto. What was the last night? What was the last thing we discussed tonight? Anything that stuck out? Was that? Where these people kept coming and they were like, Prasad was honored. What else was in the 9th canto? It's 1:30, you can serve anything. Anything else? Yeah, sure. I can do this.
So the song is testing vibration, and before the other that getting excited. It's probably he was mentioning. I'm so excited.
I mean, we should be. Sugar the side was testing fraction Mars. And fraction Mars getting excited. It's coming closer to speaking about Krishna. And which dynasty did they talk about? What is it? A good bunch in the 9th canto. In the Gada dynasty. And who was the king in the Gada dynasty? Who became old? Was it? Yeah. So Yati got old, and one of his younger sons said that he would take the curse of the old. And so Yati blessed him that the other dynasty will have a Krishna. So Krishna, that's why in this dynasty, the other dynasty, Krishna will appear. And of course, wherever they want to appear, they will appear. But that's a pastime. It's happening. And yeah, with Krishna also, Krishna can appear in any place, anytime, anyhow. But when he comes into the material world, he sometimes still follows the procedures. So that's why in India sometimes people think Krishna is an incarnation of Krishna, because all the incarnations come from Krishna. And so Krishna also, in one sense, came through that same process. That's why there's a confusion as an incarnation of Krishna. But actually, it's not the way around. Everything emanates from Krishna, including all the different kinds of Vishnus. So yeah. All right. So yeah, in the 10th canto, as you mentioned, Krishna was getting, he was getting very, very excited to hear more about Krishna. And when Krishna was in the womb, that was at the end of the Mahabharata war. he was attacked by, I don't remember which weapon it was. It was attacked with. Yeah, Brahmastra. The Brahmastra weapon, or what it calls the original nuclear weapon. And it was so powerful that it could be pointed at just one thing, one object. It wouldn't just cause wholesale devastation. It would actually guide it to just kill one person. And so in this case, Ashwatthama, he was banished, but then he had enough power to release the Brahmastra on the first woman, first by the side. And so with her came running, she's back to protect his child. And so at that time, Lord Krishna appeared in the first womb and protected Sudarshan Chakra, protected Parishit Maharaj. And so Parishit Maharaj's body was actually gone because of the Brahmastra, but Krishna revived it. And so Parishit Maharaj in the womb saw Krishna, saw the Supreme Personality. And so that's why he got that. What was his birth name? Vishnuratha. Is that one? Yeah, right. Vishnuratha. What does that mean again?
One is attached to the
One was attached to Lord Vishnu. And so that was his birth name, but then also he had prediction because he had seen Krishna in the womb. Whenever he would always look, he would like, oh, where is that person who I saw who saved me? He examined it. Is that the person? Is that the person?
The researcher.
Well, the researcher, yeah. Yeah, it literally means the examiner. So he would examine everybody and every description is description.
Hadi means all around.
Was it?
Hadi
Oh,
means
great.
all around, and Akshay is the eyes.
Oh, interesting. For means all around.
It's looking all over
Actually,
the
the
place.
eyes, looking all around. So yeah, so in this pastime also, as 10th canto starts coming, Parishit Maharaj stood looking and wanting to hear about Krishna. It's very, very eager. And so there's one major point that comes up. I guess we can go to the words now. Then we can bring it. Nivrittatarshar upagiyamana
Nivrittatarshar upagiyamana
Shrota manobhirama
Shrotamanobhirama
Uttama shloka gunanuvada
Gautama shloka gunanuvada
Virajeta vina pashna
Shrotamanobhirama
Uttama shloka gunanuvada Uttama shloka gunanuvada Virajeta vina pashna Tatarshar upagiyamana Shrotra manobhirama Ka uttama shloka gunanuvada Kuman virajeta vina prashupna. Please chant. Nivritta tarsha upagiyamana Uttama shloka gunanuvada Puman virajeta vina pashupnat. Nigrittatarshya upagiyamana Bhava sadhat shotra manopima Ka uttama shloka gunanuvada Puman virajeta vina pashutna. Anyone else? What do it together? Nivritta, release from Tarsha, lust or material activities. Upagiyamana, which is described or sung. Bhava or Shadha, which is the right medicine for the material disease. Shrotra, the process of oral reception. Mana, the subject matter of thought for the mind. Abhirama, from the pleasing vibrations from such glorification. Kahu, Uttama Shloka, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Guna Anuvadat, from describing such activities. Human, a person. Virajeta, can keep himself aloof. Vina, except. Vashugnad, either a butcher or one who is killing his own personal existence. Translation together. Glorification of Supreme Personality Godhead is performed in the Parampara system. That is, it is conveyed from spiritual master to disciple. Such glorification is relished by those no longer interested in the false temporary glorification of this cosmic manifestation. Descriptions of the Lord are the right medicine for the conditioned soul undergoing repeated birth and death. Therefore, who will cease hearing such glorification of the Lord except a butcher or one who's killing his own self? It's pretty heavy, isn't it? Like, yeah. So oftentimes in the Bhagavatam, these questions, it's kind of, yeah, it's a rhetorical question. Like, who would not hear Srimad Bhagavatam except for one who wants to just simply harm himself? All right, anyone like to read the purport? It's a big purport, so probably have to read a few sections at a time. Mike?
In India, it is a practice among the general populace
Go ahead.
to hear about Krishna, either from Bhagavad Gita or from Srimad Bhagavatam, in order to gain relief from disease of repeated birth and death. Although India is now fallen, when there is a message that someone will speak about Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, thousands of people so gather to hear. This verse indicates, however, that such recitation of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam must be done by persons completely freed from material desires. Nivritta Tarisa. Everyone within this material world, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant, is full of material desires and sense enjoyment, and everyone is busy in sense gratification. But when thus engaged, one cannot fully understand the value of Krishna Katha, either in the form of Bhagavad Gita or in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Make a quick point. I'll just make a quick point. Actually, go ahead and read. I'll make a point after this paragraph. Go ahead.
If we hear the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from liberated persons, this hearing will certainly free us from the bondage of material activities. But hearing Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by a professional reciter cannot actually help us achieve liberation. Krishna Katha is very simple. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as he himself explains. Matta parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya. O Arjuna, there is no truth superior to me. Bhagavad Gita 7:7. Simply by understanding this fact that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can become a liberated person. But especially in this age, because people are interested in hearing Bhagavad Gita from unscrupulous persons who depart from the simple presentation of Bhagavad Gita and distort it for their personal satisfaction, they fail to derive the real benefit. There are big scholars, politicians, philosophers, and scientists who speak on Bhagavad Gita in their own polluted way, and people in general hear from them. being uninterested in hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from a devotee. A devotee is one who has no other motive for reciting Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam than to serve the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has therefore advised us to hear the glories of the Lord from a realized person. Bhagavato Parodiya Bhagavata Sthane. Unless one is personally a realized soul in the science of Krishna consciousness, a neophyte should not approach him to hear about the Lord, for this is strictly forbidden by Srila Sanatana Goswami, who quotes from the Padma Puran. Avaishnava
Mukoti
Mukoti
Putam Hari Katha Matam Shravanam
Naiva
Naiva Kartupyam Sarvochistam Yathapaya.
One should avoid hearing from a person not situated in Vaishnava behavior. A Vaishnava is Nivritta Trishna, that is, he has no material purpose, for his only purpose is to preach Krishna consciousness. So-called scholars, philosophers, and politicians exploit the importance of Bhagavad Gita by distorting its meaning for their own purposes. Therefore, this verse warns that Krishna Katha should be recited by a person who is Nivritta Trishna. Sukadev Goswami epitomizes the proper reciter for Srimad Bhagavatam, and Parikshit Maharaj, who purposefully left his kingdom and family prior to meeting death, epitomizes the person fit to hear it. A qualified reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam gives the right medicine, avo sadi, for the conditioned souls. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore trying to train qualified preachers to recite Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita throughout the entire world so that people in general in all parts of the world may take advantage of this movement and thus be relieved of the threefold miseries of material existence.
That's the sound of material desires. But yeah, so Prabhupada makes a very strong point, and that the speaker has to be free of material desires. And then one can ask, like, wow, free of material desires, that's quite a tall order. I mean, who all here except Kameshi is free of material desires? It's like, how many of us are really free of material desires? And one time there was a disciple of Indradinda Maharaj. Maharaj wrote a book about her. She was young, she was very dedicated and sincere, and she was leaving her body. She had some sort of disease. She was in Vrindavan and she was leaving her body. Does anyone know that book? It's gonna bug me now, the name of the book. Was that? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And when she was, she was ill and she was crying, she was like, Gurudev, I have material desires. And Maharaj is like, what material desires you have? Most of your life you have chanted and preached, and now you're in Vrindavan leaving your body. She goes, I like tomatoes. Maharaj said, don't worry about it. Just keep chanting. Was that? What? Go ahead. Mike.
Maharaj say you can find better tomatoes in the spiritual world, so don't worry about it.
Nice. But yeah, it's like even as devotees we might have some sort of desires, but the main principle is that that we are sincerely following the previous acharyas, and because these previous acharyas, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and so forth, their whole goal was to make sure that the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita is established in its integrity. And these were people with really, there was people with integrity themselves. And so they wanted to make sure that these scriptures were spoken by the previous teachers and not just used for whatever purpose, which we see often in this world. Any religious text, really, not just the Gita or the Bhagavatam, any religious text is often manipulated for people's own, benefit or people's own ideas or whatever it is. Oftentimes, especially in India, you hear all kinds of stuff
and then they write a quote, and then they write dash Bhagavad Gita. It's like, where is it in the Gita, and whatever they're saying, it's like it's not there. And of course then people go on and kill other people, and they say, oh, this is, our scripture says to do this and so forth. Yeah, that's another extreme deviation from following scriptures. But yeah, for the acharyas, like, it comes time and again, if not every day, every few generations it comes up where like there's deviation, and then people actually aren't following what the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam says. But yeah. So in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time also, yeah, when we were reading the biography of Bhaktisiddhanta, there were all these deviant groups. There was all these groups that were actually just imitating Krishna's esoteric pastimes. And so that was a huge deviation. And at that point, nobody wanted to be a Vaishnava, because to be a Vaishnava was actually a very low class position in society because of the behavior of the Vaishnavas at that time. This is in 1800s. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur kind of revived Vaishnavism at that point. And it didn't take very long for Vaishnavism to go down. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was around in the 1600s, I believe. And, like after Lord Chaitanya and there's a few other acharyas down the road, and then after that, Vaishnavism just kind of really went downhill. So it doesn't take much actually in Kali Yuga for deviation to become a big thing. And as long as, the glory of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta was that they were so true to the teachings of the Gita and the Bhagavatam. They understood, that's the nature of a great acharya, that they understand the sum and substance of the scripture. They go beyond just the superficial understanding of any scripture. They go beyond just whatever the cultural implications of a scripture. They really, what's the third verse or second verse in the Bhagavatam, the Kaitava Dharma, but it's this shallow religion. They go beyond that shallow religion, the rituals and so forth. They actually try to understand what the purpose and the principles of the Bhagavatam are, and the Bhagavad Gita are. So when they do that, then yeah, they want to make sure that it keeps going on. That's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta, for the first time really in the Vaishnava history, they started an institution. They started the Gaudiya Math. And on top of it, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he established something called the GBC, the Governing Body Commission. Anyone know where that came from? Where they took that idea from, the GBC?
The railways.
Indian Railways, yeah. When the British were there, they established the Indian Railways, the legacy of the British, and they established something called the GBC, Governing Body Commission, to govern over the Indian Railways. So for them, at that point, that was the cutting edge of management. So they took that idea, and Bhaktisiddhanta actually, when he was leaving his body, he had instructed his disciples. Because in India, the norm was that when the acharya leaves, then the next acharya kind of inherits the whole institution or the whole temple or whatever the previous acharya has established. So that was the norm. Like one person, it's almost like your son inherits your property. So that used to be the case. But Bhaktisiddhanta said that no, we should have a GBC, a committee, a commission that's going to govern all these various mats. He used to call them mats. Mats are just temples, the centers, and so forth. And he had established about 64 at that point. And just in a short span of 25 years, he established 64 mats all over India. And so he wanted a GBC to govern that. But as soon as he left his body, what did they do? They started saying, oh, such and such is going to be the next acharya, such and such is going to be the next acharya. And then all that did was just cause more and more friction, fighting. And so that's why it's so important to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And that's why it's so important. And, in the purport also, Prabhupada goes on to say how, not just the integrity of the scriptures, but also, one has to do it in the mood of the previous acharyas, the mood of the spiritual master. And so that's why it's so important to really understand Prabhupada's mood for us, for all of us, to understand the mood of our spiritual master and to understand the mood and instructions of Prabhupada, our founder acharya. Because unless we do that, then we really won't be able to imbibe the lives and teachings of Srila Prabhupada. And it's actually really sweet when you really get into Prabhupada's mood and understand why why the acharyas do certain things and so forth, and then we are able to live in those instructions. But yeah, that's a major point in the Bhagavatam often, that one can't just hear the Srimad Bhagavatam from just anybody. One actually has to be qualified. And as long as one is in line with the previous acharyas, and so one time somebody asked Prabhupada, how many pure devotees there are in ISKCON. So Prabhupada looked at Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he asked him how many devotees are there at that point. Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said like few thousands, I can't remember the number. Whatever he said, like 5,000. So Prabhupada said, oh, we have 5,000 pure devotees. And so the point Prabhupada was making, that if one sincerely follows a pure devotee, a pure acharya, then they automatically are a pure devotee. Our hearts might still have many misgivings, of course, but since we're actually following in the footsteps as sincerely and as best as possible, then actually we're we're awarded that status of pure devotee as well. But as soon as we're not following, and as soon as from time and again, Krishna will point out these various misgivings in our hearts, and we'll have to do our own self-inventory and see why am I doing a certain act? Am I doing it because it's based on a principle, or I'm just doing it because it's whatever, I like it, and even though it's not necessarily good for my Krishna consciousness, I'm still going to go ahead and do it. And then, of course, that doesn't give us the license to go around telling everybody that they shouldn't do certain things because it's not good for their Krishna consciousness, unless they ask for that, and then you can get on their case. But but yeah, Radha Maharaj often says, be heavy on yourself, be liberal with others. So yeah, we are heavy on ourselves. We should be sometimes, because we really want to see are we actually following the life and the precepts and the teachings of the previous acharyas, and are we living our life based on the principles that the Bhagavatam is setting? And I guess before that, one has to read the Srimad Bhagavatam to understand the instructions of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And yeah, so before Parikshit Maharaj got to the 10th canto, he had to go through 9 cantos. There's all kinds of things in the 9 cantos. I think the 9th canto was the most interesting. And actually, Lord Chaitanya, he would have Gadadhar Pandit, he would read him the pasta from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he would ask Gadadhar Pandit, oh, read me the pasta of Dhruva Maharaj again. So he would read it again, and then after he would read it again, read it again. And so he would just like those pastimes so much, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, and so forth. And so Lord Chaitanya set that example for us, that it's I'm just going to jump into the 10th canto. I'm going to just jump into the esoteric pastimes of Krishna. No, Lord Chaitanya really enjoyed and really relished these various pastimes of various great acharyas like Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj in the previous cantos. So we really want to understand and go deeply in those pastimes first before you go jump into the 10th canto. And then somebody's going to ask, but what about the Krishna book? And does anyone know why Prabhupada, even the Prabhupada insisted so many times that, and the acharyas have insisted we go through the first few cantos initially before we get to the 10th canto? Why did Prabhupada go ahead and publish the Krishna book, which is basically the 10th canto? Anyone know the reason why? Actually, wait, hold on. Gopal knows everything anyways. But yeah, anyone else? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, he didn't know how long he was going to live. Plus, Prabhupada said one time he gave us nectar of devotion early on too. So he gives that's not like represents Radharani. So he gives Radha Krishna right off the book, right off the bat.
What did you say about nectar instruction? I didn't catch that.
No, but yeah, not nectar of instruction, nectar of devotion.
Okay.
Brahmatirtha said one time that was one of the early books. He gave us the Krishna book because he didn't know if he was going to get to the 10th canto to translate.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And he gave us nectar of devotion early on, which is Radharani. So he gave us Radharani and Krishna like right off the bat.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Prabhupada didn't know how much more time he had. So he was translating Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he just was like, let me just translate the 10th canto in the Krishna book format. Yes, Prabhupada.
Also in Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book, he weaves the philosophy into the narration of the pastimes. So it's safe that way, because the danger of the 10th canto is that we take it to be just stories, and we kind of take it cheaply, not really understanding who Krishna is and what these relationships with the Rajavasis are all about. So it can be kind of bewildering, and we can think that Krishna's immoral or whatever, but if you actually, the idea is that if we read the first 9 cantos nicely, then we'll understand very well who Krishna is, the source of all incarnations and all this. And we get the 10th canto, it's like, yeah, Krishna can do anything because he's God. But then, and they're all his energies. But if we read, so Prabhupada concisely put the basic philosophy into the Krishna book.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, when you jump into when you jump to the 10th canto, and there's the whole pastimes with the Rasalila and everything, Krishna dancing with other people's wives, and it's like, oh, everybody gets bewildered then if they don't really understand who Krishna is beforehand.
Yeah, along that same point that you and Prabhupada were making was, I was told that, yeah, we just need to understand the science of Krishna and the power of Krishna, that he's a creator and that he's not an ordinary person. Because if we jump to the 10th canto, then we may think that he's an ordinary person because his dealings are very similar to our dealings.
Yeah. And even though they appear similar, still he has like 16,108 wives. And then people like oh, when the British found these texts about Krishna, they were like who is this debauchee god? For them, they just didn't make any sense. But yeah, one has to actually understand who Krishna is previous to the 10th canto to really then delve into more of his intimate pastimes with the residents of Vrindavan. But going back to the point of listening from the parampara system, because Prabhupada brings that up also, right? You have to hear the Bhagavatam from a proper speaker. And so, and Bhaktisiddhanta also, when he really wanted to get initiated by Gaurkishore Babaji Maharaj. And so he went there and he just kept begging him for initiation. And Gaurkishore Babaji, his mood was that he kind of didn't want to be bothered in general. He just, he would, we were talking about the other day, he would, sometimes he would just stay in an outhouse so that people wouldn't come bother him. And because back in the day, people would just come for material blessings. They would ask for initiation, but it would just really mean like, oh, just give me blessings so that I have wealth and prosperity. So he just didn't want to bother with all of that. So sometimes he would just live in an outhouse, and sometimes, he would wear scraps clothing from like dead bodies. He would just take it from the crematorium and just wear that. And sometimes, if somebody gave him a fancy, like a silk dhoti, and so he wore that and went to the marketplace and he kept saying out loud, "Oh, look at me! I'm such a great devotee wearing this nice dhoti," making a scene so that everybody kind of like, what's going on? Just kind of leave him alone. So that was his general mood. But then Bhaktisiddhanta really insisted, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur told him you should go to get initiated by Gaurkishore. And also another reason why Bhaktivinoda Thakur did that at that point was because even now, but especially back then, there was this, there was this family line of just giving like the son becomes inherits the father's kingdom. So the son just becomes the next acharya, because by virtue of being the son of the acharya. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't want it to be like that. So he said, why don't you go get initiation from Gaur Kishoredas Babaji Maharaj? And so he did, and he kept asking. And then finally Bhaktisiddhanta said, I'm just gonna go throw myself in the Ganges if you don't give me initiation. And so, Gaur Kishoredas Babaji, did he keep telling him like, oh, I'm gonna see what Lord Chaitanya tells me tonight? Is that what he kept saying, right? Do you remember that, Prabhupada?
He said he was gonna ask
He was gonna ask Mahaprabhu, yeah. See what he says. Forget lost, yeah. So finally, when Bhaktisiddhanta said, I'm gonna go throw myself in the Ganges. So then Gaur Kishoredas Babaji said, okay, I'm gonna give you initiation. So then he initiated him. And then but then Bhaktisiddhanta went on to chant. He wanted to go and chant billion names of Krishna. So he had this little hut, and then he would just chant whole day and barely eat anything. I think one of the devotees mentioned how he would have a plate, and he would have, he would just have cooked a little bit of rice, and then he would just bend down on the plate and eat whatever he could, and that was it. And it was a small hut, and whenever it would rain, the roof would leak, and he just would open an umbrella inside, and that was it. He didn't have a general manager to call to fix the roof. But he just chanted. That was about 10 years actually. He chanted a billion names, and then he went on to preach. And at one point there was this one devotee, Kunja Bihari, who really just kind of found him. He was kind of the manager for Bhaktisiddhanta. So he saw this really elevated sadhu, who preaches pretty well. And so he kind of started managing Bhaktisiddhanta's affairs and just, arranging everything. And he was the one who would fundraise and establish temples. And then, but then later when Bhaktisiddhanta left his body, Kunja Bihari tried to take over also all the temples and so forth. And Prabhupada actually said that. Prabhupada said that Bhaktisiddhanta left his body early because he was a little disheartened by seeing his followers fighting over properties even before he had left his body. So, and then that came into fruition once he had left his body. But once Bhaktisiddhanta was initiated by Gaur Kishoredas Babaji Maharaj, later he actually, when Gaur Kishoredas Babaji then left his body, and there was these other sadhus, I guess, in the local area, and then they wanted to each of them wanted Gaur Kishoredas, his body, to be to have a samadhi for him in their own temple, because the more samadhis you have, the more money you get. So that each one of them wanted that, and then Bhaktisiddhanta showed up, and he said, no, I'm his disciple, so I'm gonna establish his samadhi. And at that point, they're all protesting. So Bhaktisiddhanta said, all right, let me ask you a question. He said, how many of you have not been in touch with the opposite sex in the past 6 months? And nobody, raised their hands. I said, last 3 months, nobody. Last month, last week, one day, So I was like, all right, they all just backed off at that point. And then Gaur Kishoredas Babaji, he was very renounced. So he had actually said like, oh yeah, when I have left my body and dragged my body in various marketplaces. So they were planning to do that. And Bhaktisiddhanta was like, no, don't do that. He was saying that out of his humility. And so then he established his samadhi. And then afterwards, Bhaktisiddhanta, at that point, he felt that there was nobody really qualified to give him sannyas. So he actually ended up having a picture of Gaur Kishoredas Babaji Maharaj, and he ended up giving himself sannyas. But don't try it at home. But he did that because he felt there was nobody qualified at that point in time. And so then after taking sannyas, he started preaching a lot and so forth, established a lot of temples. And then I believe it was 1932, 1922-ish, he met Srila Prabhupada. He met Abhay Charan. And Prabhupada went to meet Bhaktisiddhanta because his friend really was telling Prabhupada that you have to meet the sadhu. He's really, he is really empowered. And Prabhupada himself had grown up in a Vaishnava family, and his father would often invite a lot of quote unquote sadhus who were, some of them were of good character, some were not. But his father was just really wanted the blessings of the sadhus, and he wanted to, keep serving the sadhus. So he would invite all these pious and religious people, and he would just serve them prasadam and so forth. And so Prabhupada said, "Oh, I've seen so many these fake religious people." And this friend kept insisting, like, no, he's genuine. So he actually literally dragged Prabhupada to go meet Bhaktisiddhanta. And then as soon as Bhaktisiddhanta saw Prabhupada, he said, "You are a young, educated man. Why don't you go preach in the West?" Like, as soon as he saw him, he said that. And then Prabhupada, he was kind of a little shocked that somebody he just met said that right off the bat. And so Prabhupada said, "Well, we are still under the British. Who is going to listen to us? We are still under colonial rule." And Bhaktisiddhanta said, "It doesn't matter. Krishna consciousness goes beyond the politics of the times." And so he kind of kept trying to argue with Bhaktisiddhanta, but Bhaktisiddhanta kept defeating all his arguments. And so at that time, Prabhupada said that, "Yes, I was defeated, but I was very pleased that I was defeated." And so oftentimes with us and others also, when that's why acharyas are so potent, because they're really following the instructions of the Bhagavatam. And so when they speak, it really touches people's hearts, because they're not saying anything to just flatter them. And it doesn't, at the same time, it doesn't mean that we can be jerks about it and be like, "You're a Maya, you're a Buddha, you're a donkey," whatever, like, yeah. It doesn't mean we have to be jerks about it. You can still speak the truth in a very assertive manner, but you can still speak it nicely. And there's so many times when Prabhupada would speak with each person based on time, place, circumstance, based on who they were and so forth. And so Prabhupada wouldn't just go out, bashing everybody and so forth. And they actually, as a matter of fact, even Bhaktisiddhanta, he would invite so many British officers or whoever, British people, and because he wanted to really establish Gaudiya Math as this really intellectual and if not elite, it's this really prestigious organization that was spreading Krishna consciousness. So it invite a lot of just high-ranking British officials. I believe there's pictures of him with the governor of Bengal back then. And so sometimes they would even have meat for them. And the most one of the most innovative programs Bhaktisiddhanta had was that they would hold this big fair, in the fairgrounds. And the beginning of the fair was just like a normal, regular, run-of-the-mill fair. It was just, I don't know what they used to have back in the day, but it was all fun and games. Was it? The Ferris wheel, yeah, stuff like that. So like the beginning part was that, and then as you go in further, there will be like these dioramas of Krishna's pastimes and this lot more preaching efforts were there in the back. And so he would be innovative like that. And what else? And also you were mentioning, right? He went to Radhakund. He drove in a car. He went in a car, and he was wearing actually like I don't know if he was wearing a jacket at that time, but there was like a Western coat he was wearing. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So Bhaktisiddhanta, like, he really understood the teachings of the Bhagavatam, and at the same time he was very innovative, and he was very bold, of course, and at the same time he had a very sweet side to him as well. And in the Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, there's this one story where there was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta who was a brahmachari, and some of the other devotees were kind of getting on his case because they felt he was not very up to standard. And so that brahmachari just left the temple. And so when Bhaktisiddhanta came and visited, he asked for that specific devotee, like, "Oh, where is he?" And they all said, "Oh, he left." Like, "Oh, why did he leave?" "Oh, these other devotees who were chastising were sannyasis. They were already renounced monks. So they said, "We were chastising him." So Bhaktisiddhanta said, "Why did you chastise him? Where now he has left." So he said, "Everybody go and search for him." And they were thinking, like, where could he have gone? Where could he have gone? And somebody finally said, well, he used to fix our watches, so maybe, maybe he works at some watch repair shop. So they actually went and found him working at a watch repair shop. And so Bhaktisiddhanta called for him and he said, "Oh, please don't leave." He really, it was just like a father, who's talking to his son, like, "Don't leave, stay in the association of devotees." And so the brahmachari wanted to marry. So that was another thing. And sometimes the idea is like, "Oh, well, you're a brahmachari, you gotta be brahmachari for life, and you take renunciation, become a monk and so forth." So it was a lot of pressure. So I told him, "Don't worry, just marry, be happy, and be in the association of devotees." So Bhaktisiddhanta also had a very sweet and soft side to himself. And yeah, an acharya knows how to behave in each particular instance. And an acharya just doesn't go with guns blazing every time and everywhere. And like Prabhupada, we see that in all of our acharyas' lives. Sometimes they're heavy, sometimes they're not. So it just depends on what they feel is the need of the hour. But yeah, so Bhaktisiddhanta, yeah, there's so many things to say about him, but and of course the Bhagavatam kind of mixed it in. But yeah, so now we're gonna start studying the 10th canto, and just a quick thing. So the 10th canto, it's gonna start with Devaki getting married to Vasudev, and then Kamsa, that was the custom that the brother would actually take the sister, to the new household. And so they were going, and then there was sound in the sky, a voice in the sky saying, "Kamsa, you fool, the same woman who you take on the chariot, her 8th son will kill you." And so Kamsa just, so a person of such a low character, he just gets up and pulls out his sword and is about to kill his own sister on her wedding day. And then at that point, Vasudev, the husband, he was trying to just kind of be diplomatic and tell him, "You're not this body, you're going to lose your kingdom anyways when you die." I was trying to give so many philosophical instructions and arguments, and in a very diplomatic way. And Kamsa was kind of listening, but not really. And Vasudev could tell he's not listening. And so at that point, he said, "All right, I'm going to give you our 8th son when he's born." And oh no, he actually he said I'll give you all my kids, yeah, all the kids. So at that point, Kamsa was a little pacified. But of course, later, when Vasudev brought the firstborn son, Kamsa said, "Oh, don't worry, the voice in the sky said it was the 8th son." And so he let him keep the child. But then Narada Muni appeared, and Narada Muni said to Kamsa, "Oh, all these demigods," because that's what was happening, that the demigods were all distressed because there were so many demoniac kings. So they had gone, Lord Brahma had gone to Lord Vishnu, and he had asked, "Oh, please help relieve earth." And so Lord Vishnu had said, "I'm gonna appear, but you all demigods also start appearing in the Yadu dynasty." So Narada Muni told that to Kamsa, that all these demigods are appearing, and so so maybe you should go ahead, kill the kids. And so he just a little earlier. Oh, okay, my 8th one. Yeah. So at that point, then he asked for the child, and then he started killing all the children of Vasudeva and Devaki. And so yeah, and then Krishna appears at the 8th child of Vasudeva and Devaki. But yeah, so that's the start of the 10th canto. All right. I don't think any thoughts, comments, questions? 1 or 2 questions. Yes, bro.
Just wanted to share that when we went to Mayapur, we went to Kolkata this last time, we visited that place where,
Oh yeah.
yeah, Ultradanga Junction. And now ISKCON has the property, and they made it so beautiful. They followed the descriptions of how it was at that time, and they renovated the place so that it's exactly like, the way it was. And it's really beautiful. And you can go to the rooftop there, the actual roof where Bhaktisiddhanta was speaking, and there's an audience there, and you can sit there, and the roof is like so gorgeous. It's like a big, anyways, you can sit there and just like visualize the scene, that Srila Prabhupada and his friend came up and paid obeisances, and Bhaktisiddhanta was sitting there on the asana like they have it there. You can feel something, like it's a powerful place. It's really cool.
All right, Kantra Shri Bhagavatam ki.